She was a foreign exchange student, brilliant, isolated, pregnant. Her professor said he loved her. His wife welcomed the child like her own. Then one day, she vanished. Weeks later, the same couple appeared in public with a newborn. No one asked questions, until one friend refused to let it go. What she uncovered beneath their perfect suburban home shocked the nation. But that was only the beginning. This is a true-to-life psychological thriller based on real behavioral patterns and modern ideological threats. Watch until the very end to understand how easily one person's silence can become another's prison. Like, comment, and subscribe for more true crime-inspired stories that expose the darkness hiding in plain sight. Sometimes, the darkest secrets live behind the brightest smiles. At 7 a.m. sharp, the white colonial-style home on Hawthorne Lane lit up like clockwork. Coffee brewed in the kitchen, the sprinklers clicked on across the manicured front lawn, and a silver Volvo backed out of the garage with mechanical precision. To everyone on the street, William and Mary Hartley were the picture of success and suburban perfection. He was a tenured professor of philosophy at Portland State University. She ran a small but tastefully curated vintage boutique on Belmont Street. They had been married for over 20 years. No children, no drama, no scandal. Just holiday cards, charity fundraisers, and polite nods at the farmers' market on Saturdays. But that was all on the surface. What no one knew, not the neighbors, not the faculty at the university, not even Mary's closest friends, was that their marriage had become a quiet vacuum. Sterile, hollow. The years of fertility treatments had ended long ago. The baby names once scribbled on Post-it notes were now buried under stacks of old tax returns and long-expired adoption applications. They had made peace with it, or so it seemed. That's why when a baby appeared in their lives, seemingly out of nowhere, everyone assumed it was a miracle of adoption, or maybe some relative's child taken in during hard times. No one questioned it. Why would they? The Hartleys were good people, the kind who volunteered at library fundraisers and paid their gardener early at Christmas. No one saw it coming. No one suspected that the story behind that child was far darker than anyone could imagine. That morning, before anyone knew what would unravel in the months to come, Professor William Hartley stood in his sun-drenched kitchen stirring honey into his tea while his wife gently rocked an infant in her arms. "You look tired," he said. Mary didn't look up. "He didn't sleep." William glanced at the baby, then at his wife. "It's worth it," he said softly. She nodded, but there was something unreadable in her eyes. Outside, a neighbor walking his dog waved toward the kitchen window. William smiled and waved back. The smile didn't reach his eyes. 2 miles away, on the 4th floor of the university's administration building, a student worker stapled flyers to a bulletin board. Missing, Alina Schwartz. The photo on the flyer showed a young woman, 23 years old, bright-eyed, blonde, European features smiling under soft, natural light. She had vanished 2 months earlier. No leads, no credit card activity, no travel records. According to Portland PD, she had simply disappeared. But someone knew the truth. Someone who now had everything they ever wanted. Every dangerous story starts with a secret you think you can control. Fall had just begun in Portland. The campus trees were shedding copper-colored leaves onto cobblestone walkways, and the chill in the morning air hinted at rain. Students shuffled between buildings with coffee cups in hand, earbuds in, shoulders hunched against the wind. Somewhere in that academic chaos, a newcomer stood out, though she didn't try to. Her name was Alina Schwartz, and she wasn't like the others. She came from Vienna. Her accent was soft but noticeable. Her style was understated, vintage wool coats, worn leather satchels, and a red scarf she wore every day, no matter the weather. It wasn't trendy or romantic. It looked old, like something passed down, and she wore it with a quiet, deliberate confidence that made you look twice. Alina wasn't loud in class, but when she spoke, people listened. She had a way of phrasing things, questions about moral philosophy, ethics, identity, that made even Professor Hartley pause before answering. He'd been teaching for 22 years. He thought he'd heard it all. But Alina brought something different to the room. The first time they really talked was after a lecture on Plato's allegory of the cave. "Do you ever wonder," she asked as she lingered by the podium, "if we're all still inside the cave, but some of us know it?" He looked up, curious. "You mean, aware of the illusion but choosing to stay?" "Yes," she said, "because leaving means losing everything that feels safe, even if it's false." Hartley didn't answer right away. That question, posed so simply, haunted him the rest of the evening. It wasn't just her mind that captivated him. It was the way she moved through the world, curious, watchful, detached, as though she were studying everything and trusting no one. He found himself looking for her in lectures, noticing when she was absent, catching himself imagining her reading in his office or walking through his garden with that red scarf trailing in the wind. It made him uncomfortable, and yet he didn't stop. The first invitation. It started with something small. A departmental coffee hour. He invited the entire class to an informal gathering after midterms. Only 4 students showed up. One of them was Alina. She was polite, reserved, but when the conversation turned to European politics, her eyes lit up. Hartley asked her about Austria, her family, what brought her to the U.S. on a student visa. She deflected most of the questions, laughing softly. "I needed distance," she said, "from a life that felt too planned." Something about that answer struck him. When the others left, she stayed behind to help gather empty coffee cups. He thanked her. She smiled, shrugged, and said, "I don't mind. I like quiet rooms." He offered to walk her back to her dorm. She declined. But the next week, she showed up at his office hours. Then again. And again. Unseen, not unnoticed. Mary Hartley noticed the change long before William admitted it to himself. He came home later. His lectures took longer to prepare. He started buying books he'd already read, mostly European philosophers, and leaving them stacked on the coffee table like forgotten clues. At night, Mary sat on their side porch with a glass of wine, listening to the sound of silence inside the house. She didn't ask questions. She hadn't in years. But her eyes followed him with the quiet intuition of a woman who's already seen her future unfold and hates it. Then, one day, she asked, "Is it someone young?" William was caught off guard. "What?" "The girl," Mary said. "You're distracted. I see it in your hands. You talk less, but you smile more. So, she must be young." He said nothing. She didn't push. But later that week, she found a red thread on the floor of his office. It matched nothing she owned. A secret arrangement. By late October, the boundaries between student and professor had blurred completely. Alina had no family in the U.S. Her host family lived an hour away and barely kept in touch. When her roommate dropped out mid-semester, she was left alone in a dorm suite meant for 2. That's when the visits started. At first, she came to the Hartleys' house under the pretense of reviewing essays, then helping sort books for a university donation drive. Mary was polite but cold. Alina smiled, asked questions, offered to help in the garden. Then, one weekend, Mary left town to visit her sister in Seattle, and Alina stayed the night. After that, it became regular. More than a mistake. To Hartley, it was never about lust. That's what he told himself. It was about understanding, connection, recognition. In Alina, he saw the passion and potential that had long since drained from his own life. In their quiet hours together, reading, walking, cooking simple meals, he imagined a new version of himself, one that hadn't yet hardened, one that still believed in things. But Alina was not naive. She knew the balance of power. She knew this could not last. And she knew she was pregnant before she told him. Final scene. The secret between them. She waited until finals week to tell him. They were sitting in his car outside her dorm, the rain streaking across the windshield like veins. "I'm late," she said simply. 6 weeks. His hands froze on the steering wheel. "I don't want anything from you," she added quickly. "I just thought you should know." He turned to her, a dozen thoughts crashing into each other. His career, his marriage, his reputation, his own aging hands, the idea of a child, a second chance. And then he whispered something she didn't expect. Maybe this is what was meant to happen. For a moment they sat in the quiet, the heater humming softly. Alina looked out the window and pulled her red scarf tighter around her neck. The most dangerous moment isn't when someone vanishes. It's the silence that follows when no one's looking for them. It was a Thursday when Alina missed her first class. Professor Hartley stood behind the lectern, scanning the room as he always did. Her seat, third row, second from the left, was empty. No scarf draped across the chair. No quietly opened notebook. Just absence. He didn't mention it, but he noticed. By Friday, she hadn't responded to his texts. By Saturday, her number was disconnected. On Sunday, her dorm room was found empty. Her clothes, books, even her toothbrush, gone. No signs of a struggle, no note, no forwarding address, just a message sent from her phone to the university's housing department. "I've left campus for personal reasons. Please consider my room vacated. Alina Schwartz." That was it. A digital whisper in place of a human being. She said she was fine. The university didn't ask questions. International students came and went. It wasn't unheard of for someone to withdraw mid-semester. But Emma LaRue, a fellow exchange student from France, wasn't so easily convinced. "I talked to her 2 days before," Emma told campus security. "She didn't mention leaving. She said she'd be in class Thursday." Security shrugged. "She must have changed her mind." "No," Emma pressed. "She said she was feeling watched." "Watched by who?" "She didn't say. She just sounded scared." The perfect alibi. Back on Hawthorne Lane, the Hartleys' home seemed as tranquil as ever. Mary tended to her garden. William returned to grading essays. No one questioned why the Volvo now had a new car seat in the back, or why Mary had begun posting baby name inspiration boards on Pinterest, or why the upstairs nursery, long sealed off and painted over, was suddenly repainted in soft, neutral tones. They had no child, no adoption paperwork, no announcement. But a few weeks later, neighbors spotted Mary walking down the sidewalk, cradling a newborn in a pale blue blanket. "Congratulations," they said. Mary smiled. "We're blessed." No one asked further. They never do when a woman looks that content. Ghost Trail. Emma didn't give up. She messaged Alina's parents in Vienna, Marcus and Evelyn Schwartz. They were stunned. "We speak to her once a week," Evelyn said. "She said nothing about returning home." Emma sent them screenshots of the university's withdrawal notice, the tone of the message, the phrasing. "This doesn't sound like her," Marcus said. "She would call." A few days later, Alina's parents received a short text from her number. "I'm safe. I needed a break. Please respect my privacy." They replied instantly, no response. The message came at 3:17 a.m., Portland time. Something was wrong. The house with drawn curtains. That same week, Emma happened to walk by the Hartleys' house. She hadn't meant to. Just took a different bus line and found herself near Hawthorne Lane. She slowed her steps as she passed. Curtains drawn, driveway empty. A faint hum behind the walls. Then she saw it. In the upstairs window, just for a second, movement. A silhouette, small, like a child. Then another. a woman gently lifting the child from the crib. Emma froze. She couldn't explain it, but her gut twisted. Alina had always spoken of wanting a child, but had also said, "It's complicated." Now, 2 weeks after her sudden disappearance, a baby appears in the home of a professor she used to visit. The sound beneath the floor. Inside the house, behind the pretty curtains and manicured hedges, Alina Schwartz was very much alive, but not free. She lay on a mattress in a soundproof room below the Hartleys' garage, an old storm cellar long since converted, once intended as wine storage, then abandoned, now resealed, repurposed. The light was dim. There were no windows. A baby monitor crackled quietly in the corner connected to the nursery above. Her wrists were no longer bound. That part had ended once the adjustment period passed. Mary said, "If you cooperate, we all live peacefully." William avoided the room. He couldn't look her in the eye. Not anymore. The baby, her baby, was upstairs. Fed, clothed, comforted, but never brought to her. The only connection was that monitor. Every coo, every whimper, every cry echoed in her bones. She screamed once. On day 3. No one came. She didn't scream again. Digital disguise. Mary handled the text messages. She learned to imitate Alina's cadence, her emojis, the frequency, the timing. She created enough activity to satisfy the outside world. Occasional posts, email logins, even a few Spotify sessions played through a VPN. She did it all with frightening ease. "I always knew I'd be a mother," she told William one night over wine. "You can't keep her here forever," he said quietly. Mary's smile was calm. "I won't. Just long enough until people stop asking." Final beat. The last friend who knew too much. 1 week later, Emma filed a missing persons report with Portland PD. Not for a student who left voluntarily, but for a woman who never said goodbye. The officer barely took notes. "She's 23, not a minor, and she contacted her parents." Emma stood her ground. "I think she's being held against her will." The officer's eyes narrowed. "By whom?" Emma hesitated. She couldn't prove it, but the words slipped out anyway. Her professor. "When no one else believes you, you're either wrong, or you're about to find something worth hiding." Rain hammered the windshield as Emma LaRue gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles white with tension. Portland's late autumn storms were unpredictable. 1 minute drizzle, the next, apocalyptic sheets of water slamming the streets. But Emma barely noticed. Her eyes were on the GPS and her mind was spinning. She'd just left the police precinct again. Another officer, another shrug, another lecture about jurisdiction and lack of concrete evidence. No warrant, no official search, no missing persons case, just a growing void where her best friend used to be. But Emma had something now. Not evidence, not yet, but something close. The nursery lights. Earlier that week she had parked near the Hartleys' house around midnight, just to watch. It was quiet, no movement, no car in the driveway, but then, at exactly 12:34 a.m., a light flicked on upstairs. The nursery. She could see it clearly from the sidewalk. Pastel walls, a mobile turning slowly above a crib. A woman's silhouette moved across the room, rocking something. And just for a moment, the curtain parted. Emma's heart dropped. It was Mary Hartley. But Alina's child was only 2 months old, and Emma had never seen any adoption papers. No hospital photos. Nothing. Something was wrong. The security footage. Now, inside a corner booth at a downtown cafe, Emma opened her laptop and loaded a jumpy, low-resolution security video. She had convinced the local dry cleaner, located just across from the Hartleys' home, to let her review their exterior footage from 3 weeks ago. Most of it was uneventful, but at 2:13 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, there it was. A figure, hunched and slow, carrying something wrapped in a blanket, entering the Hartleys' garage through a side door. The angle wasn't clear, but the red scarf trailing from the figure's neck? That was unmistakable. Emma paused the video, zoomed in. The timestamp was 1 day after Alina's official withdrawal notice. Her pulse quickened. The garage. By Sunday, Emma had a plan. She didn't trust the police. Not yet. So she took the risk. She returned to the neighborhood just before dusk, dressed in black, hair tucked under a hoodie, no car, just a bike chained a block away. She moved through the alley, hugging the fences until she reached the side of the Hartleys' garage. No cameras. She had checked. The side door was locked, but old. Wood cracked from years of rain, paint flaking off. She slid a thin piece of metal, a flattened cake spatula, into the frame and wiggled gently. A soft click. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. The door creaked open. Below the floorboards. The garage was immaculate. Tools arranged on hooks, floor swept, gardening gloves stacked neatly on a shelf. Emma moved slowly, her phone light low and steady. And then she saw it. A metal ring embedded in the floor, half hidden beneath a rolled rug. She pulled it free and lifted. A square panel came loose, revealing wooden stairs descending into darkness. Her breath caught. She whispered, "Alina?" Silence. She started down the stairs, one careful step at a time, the air growing colder with each movement. The smell hit her first, stale, metallic like rust and sweat. Then she heard it. A sound so soft it could be mistaken for wind, but wasn't. A whimper. Emma's light swept the room. And there she was. Alina. Barely conscious, wrapped in a blanket, face pale, eyes wide. Emma gasped and ran forward, dropping to her knees. "Alina, hey, it's me. It's Emma. You're okay." Alina blinked slowly, lips cracked. She tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. "Water," Emma whispered. "Hold on, I'll get you out." But the sound that stopped her cold wasn't from Alina. It came from above. The door slammed shut. Face to face. Emma turned, flashlight trembling just as the heavy garage door creaked open and above. Boots stepped onto the stairs. Then came a voice. Calm, measured, devoid of panic. "Emma," said Mary Hartley, her silhouette filling the doorway. "You shouldn't be here. It's not the secrets that kill you. It's what people do to protect them." Emma stood frozen at the bottom of the steps, one hand gripping her phone, the other instinctively outstretched in front of Alina's frail body. Her flashlight trembled. The narrow wooden stairs above creaked again as Mary Hartley took another step down. In the dim glow from the doorway, Mary's expression wasn't furious or panicked. It was calm, terrifyingly calm. "I didn't want it to be this way," she said softly, as if reading a bedtime story. "You had no reason to be here, Emma." "Let us go," Emma said, her voice cracking. "You need help. This isn't right." Mary's eyes flashed just for a second. "No," she replied, stepping fully into view. A large flashlight now in her hand. "We were building a life. A quiet, beautiful life. You came to destroy that." Upstairs, a faint cry echoed through the baby monitor that sat on a shelf. The baby, Alina's baby, was awake. Emma's mind raced. There's only one way out. The struggle. Without warning, Mary lunged forward, quick like an animal. Emma dodged, crashing backward into a metal shelving unit. Cans and jars tumbled to the floor with a metallic thunder. Emma scrambled to her feet and grabbed a broken broomstick from the corner, holding it out like a spear. Mary paused. She tilted her head. You think I won't protect my family? She whispered. Emma's pulse was thundering in her ears. You stole her baby. Mary laughed, sudden and bitter. We saved him, from her, from this mess, from a life of shame and abandonment. Alina let out a faint, painful moan from the floor. Emma lunged, not at Mary, but at the shelf. She yanked the power cord of the baby monitor from the wall and jammed it into the exposed outlet box behind the metal frame, causing a sudden spark and loud pop. The lights above flickered. The breakers snapped. Darkness, a single second of confusion. Then Emma sprinted up the stairs. Mary shouted and grabbed at her ankle, missing by inches. Emma burst through the garage door, tripped over a rake, hit the concrete floor, then jumped up again, sprinting for the driveway. 911. She didn't stop running until she reached the neighbor's yard, pounding on the front door. Help! Call the police! A porch light flicked on. A confused elderly man appeared in the frame. Emma grabbed his cordless phone, shaking. She dialed. 911, what is your emergency? She was breathless, panicked. There's a woman, my friend. She's being held in a basement on Hawthorne Lane. 1749. She has a child. I think they were going to kill us. Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? Yes. Units are on the way. Stay on the line. Back at the house. Inside the house, Mary Hartley stood still in the center of the nursery. The baby cried softly in the crib, unaware of what just happened. Mary gently picked him up, humming softly. Then she moved to the hallway and called out calmly, William. He appeared seconds later, pale and half-dressed, panic written all over his face. She knows, Mary said. She found her? Mary nodded. William swore under his breath, then froze as sirens began to echo in the distance. She called the police, he whispered. Mary didn't flinch. She kissed the baby's forehead, handed him to William, and said, Take him. Back entrance. Get to the car. He hesitated. Do it. Then she turned, walked back into the garage, and disappeared into the basement. Enter the detective. 10 minutes later, the scene outside 1749 Hawthorne Lane looked like something from a crime drama. 3 police cruisers, a black SUV, a small crowd gathering across the street. In the middle of it all, stepping out of the SUV in a long coat and dark jeans, was Detective Julian Carter, 42. Sharp eyes, no nonsense. He ducked under the police tape, took one look at Emma, blanket around her shoulders, blood on her knuckles, eyes wild, and said, Tell me everything. There's a moment, just before a man's world collapses, when he still thinks he can fix everything. Professor William Hartley stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror of a roadside motel just outside Portland. His usually neat collar was crumpled, his eyes bloodshot, hair unkempt. He looked older, like a decade had passed in a night. In his arms, wrapped tightly in a blanket, was the child. His child. At least, that's what he kept telling himself. The baby was asleep, unaware of the sirens that had screamed down Hawthorne Lane just 30 minutes earlier. Unaware that the only home he had known was now surrounded by police tape. Unaware that his mother had been locked beneath the floor for weeks, and that his father, his biological father, was preparing to run. William sat on the edge of the bed, the baby cradled in his arms. The room smelled of old cigarettes and bleach, the hum of the mini-fridge the only sound. He had paid in cash. No ID, no questions, but inside his head, a hurricane. 6 hours earlier. He hadn't planned for this. Not for Emma, not for flashing lights, not for Mary slamming the basement door shut and telling him to take the baby and leave. She had sounded calm, even then, as if this had always been the backup plan. You're going to drive to the old motel near I-5, she had said. Room 7, like before. He had barely nodded. Took the baby, keys, bag, left through the alley and into the woods behind their house, just as he had rehearsed months ago. He never thought they'd use that plan. He never thought she'd actually go through with everything. But then again, he had gone through with it too. He had crossed a line, and then another and another, until turning back wasn't even an option anymore. The mirror doesn't lie. Now, under the motel's buzzing fluorescent lights, William looked again at himself in the mirror. This time he saw it clearly. Not the professor, not the husband, not even the man Alina had once trusted with her secret. What he saw was the version of himself he had tried to deny. A coward, a thief, a liar. He sank to the floor, back against the door, baby still asleep, and whispered, "I didn't mean for this to happen." But he had, not all at once, but in steps. First the affair, then the secret, then the plan. When Mary had suggested keeping the baby permanently, he'd said no. At first, but he hadn't stopped her. He'd let it happen. He'd told himself it was for love. And now, there was blood on that love. Back at the scene, entered Detective Carter. While William spiraled in a motel room, Detective Julian Carter was moving through the Hartleys' house like a surgeon in an operating theater. He was calm, precise, methodical. He had seen hundreds of cases: missing persons, domestic abuse, kidnappings. But this was a new beast. A soundproof basement, a malnourished woman, a newborn child missing, a vigilante college girl who nearly got herself killed trying to find the truth. The detective had only been on scene for an hour, but already his instincts were screaming. Something about the house was too ordered. There were no signs of chaos, no last-minute packing, no paper trails. Whoever left with intention. This wasn't panic, it was choreography, and that meant someone had planned this escape well in advance. The basement. Downstairs, officers helped Alina out of the basement. Her legs shook as she stood. A paramedic held her arm while Emma stayed close, refusing to let go of her hand. Detective Carter approached slowly. "Alina, my name is Julian Carter. I'm here to help." Her eyes flicked to his badge, to the uniformed officers around her, and finally back to his eyes. She whispered, hoarse, "Where's my baby?" "We're working on that," Carter said gently, "but I need to know everything. Can you tell me what happened? How long you've been here?" Alina swallowed hard, and then she began to speak. The confession. For the next 20 minutes, the living room turned into a confession booth. Alina told Carter everything. How she'd fallen for Professor Hartley. How she'd told him about the pregnancy. How Mary had seemed almost too accepting. How, when the baby was just a few days old, she woke up in a strange room, tied to a bed. How they told her the baby was fine. That he was being cared for upstairs, but she would need to stay out of sight for a while. Alina began to cry, not from fear, from powerlessness. They fed me. They even spoke kindly sometimes, like I was part of some twisted family. Carter nodded, scribbling notes. And the child? They named him Isaac. Mary said it meant laughter. But he's mine. He's mine. Her voice cracked on that last word. Carter didn't interrupt. He simply nodded, and then said, "We're going to find him, I promise." The search begins. Back at HQ, Carter's team started digging. Traffic cams, toll booths, gas station security footage. They issued an Amber Alert. News stations lit up with photos of Alina and her child. Breaking. Missing Portland student found alive. Child still missing. Carter stood before a whiteboard filled with pins, strings, maps. He knew William Hartley was out there, probably alone, probably scared, but desperate men make mistakes, and Carter was counting on that. Final scene. Motel room, 3:12 a.m. William Hartley was still sitting on the floor, now cradling the baby in a swaddle of blankets. The motel TV was on, volume low. The local news anchor's voice drifted across the room. The woman, identified as Alina Schwartz, reported missing nearly 2 months ago, was discovered alive earlier this evening. William stared at the screen. A mugshot of Mary appeared, then his own photo from the university faculty page. His blood ran cold. He turned off the TV, slowly stood, looked at the baby. Isaac yawned, then curled into his chest. And then William whispered something only the baby could hear. "Daddy's going to fix this." He stepped toward the door and disappeared into the night. You can disappear from the world, but the world leaves fingerprints on everything you touch. The morning after the Amber Alert went out, Portland was buzzing. By 7 a.m., social media feeds were filled with reposts of the composite image. William Hartley, 48, Portland State University professor. Wanted in connection with the abduction of infant Isaac Schwartz. Last seen driving a silver Volvo XC60. You bring Isaac home. Skate hind Hartley Kadihor. Free Alina. The hashtags spread like fire. Every news anchor in the region repeated the same chilling truth. A trusted academic may have stolen a baby and disappeared into the night. Motel Room 7, abandoned. Detective Julian Carter stood in the middle of the dingy motel room, glancing around like he was building the scene in his head. He eyed the empty crib against the wall, the half-used can of baby formula, a room key left behind. He didn't rush, Carter muttered. The motel clerk, a weary man in his 60s, stood nearby. He paid cash, no license plate, said he was taking his nephew out of the city for a bit. Had kind eyes, I thought. Did he say where he was going? No, but he bought 2 cans of gas at the station across the street. That was something. Carter pulled out his phone. Trace all security footage around here. Check for Volvo SUVs refueling in the last 6 hours. I want every camera from here to the Washington border pulled and scanned. The man on the road. Meanwhile, William Hartley was already over 150 miles away, deep into southern Washington, driving north toward Seattle. His hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds. The baby cooed quietly in the car seat behind him. He pulled off at a remote gas station in Chehalis, keeping his head down, ball cap low. Inside the convenience store, he grabbed diapers, wet wipes, 2 protein bars, and a bottle of water. Paid in cash again. But what he didn't notice, what he couldn't notice, was that a security camera above the register was connected to a real-time alert system, and that the clerk, a bored high school senior on the morning shift, recognized his face immediately from Instagram. She waited until he was gone, then she called 911, Carter's break. Back in Portland, Carter's phone rang before noon. "We've got a hit," his tech officer said. "Chehalis, Washington, security footage. He's in a Volvo. Same build, baby's visible in the back seat. How long ago?" 47 minutes. Carter was already moving. "I want state troopers on alert. Get Washington State Police involved. Coordinate traffic cams on I-5 northbound and alert SeaTac. If he's heading for a flight, we can't let him reach that terminal." Parallel lines. At the same time, Alina sat in the hospital room, recovering under heavy guard. Her face was pale, her voice a whisper, but her mind was clear. She held Emma's hand tightly, the IV in her other arm trembling as she turned toward the detective at her bedside. "He won't hurt the baby," she said with quiet certainty. "He's delusional, but not cruel." "You sure?" Carter asked gently. "He thinks he's doing the right thing," Alina said, eyes distant. "That he's saving Isaac from a world of chaos." Emma, still shaken but fierce, leaned forward. "What if he doesn't turn himself in? What if he thinks he has nothing left to lose?" Carter nodded grimly. Then we have to find him before he decides what's next. William's breaking point. Back on the road, the pressure was building. William kept driving north, past Olympia, past Tacoma. Seattle glittered faintly in the distance, framed by gray clouds and morning fog. But his destination was farther still. He had a cabin, an old one, barely maintained, nestled in the woods near Mount Rainier. No Wi-Fi, no phone line, no neighbors for miles. It had always been his escape plan, even before any of this happened. A place no one knew about. Almost no one. Unexpected detour. But 20 miles from the cabin, flashing lights appeared behind him. State troopers, 2 cruisers. William's heartbeat exploded in his chest. He couldn't stop now. He couldn't lose Isaac. So he pressed the gas. The Volvo surged forward, windshield wipers squeaking as a light drizzle began. The troopers followed. The chase begins. Inside the command center, Detective Carter stood over a digital map with 2 red markers moving across I-5. "Don't box him in yet," Carter told the officers over radio. "He's got a baby in that car. Keep distance. Make him nervous but not reckless." The chase lasted 23 minutes. Then William veered off the highway onto a logging road, tires skidding over gravel and wet leaves. 1 cruiser followed. The other stayed back to alert the air unit. Carter's jaw clenched as he watched the feed update. "Come on, William," he muttered. "Don't make this worse." Final scene. The cabin. At 4:31 p.m., the Volvo turned off the logging trail and crept down a steep dirt driveway. The trees closed in like arms. Ahead, the roof of an old cabin emerged through the mist. William parked the car, sat for a moment, staring at his own hands. Then he got out, lifted the sleeping baby from the back seat, and walked toward the front steps. Behind him, tires crunched the gravel. 2 police vehicles rolled into view. Doors opened. Guns were not drawn. Yet. William turned slowly, clutching the baby. The officers stepped forward. "Sir, put the child down and place your hands where we can see them." He hesitated. Then something broke. He fell to his knees. Tears flooded his face. "I didn't want to be a monster," he whispered. "I just wanted to be a father. Sometimes survival is the beginning of a different kind of pain." The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beep of the monitor and the low hum of fluorescent lights. Outside, dusk crept across Portland like a gray velvet curtain. But inside room 304, time had stopped. Alina sat propped up in bed, her hair brushed back, eyes red from crying. She hadn't moved in minutes, not since they placed Isaac in her arms. He was warm, he was real. She traced his tiny fingers with trembling hands, breathing in the scent of his skin. Part hospital, part homecoming. He stirred slightly in her arms, let out a soft coo, and nestled closer. Emma sat nearby, wiping silent tears from her face. Neither of them spoke. What could you say to a woman who'd been buried alive in silence and came back to find the world still spinning? A different kind of reunion. Detective Julian Carter stood just outside the room, watching through the window. He didn't intrude, didn't knock. He just observed, notebook in hand, the way a historian observes a living monument. His phone buzzed. "Subject in custody. No incident. Mother and child reunited. DA requests full report by morning." Carter turned away from the glass, his thoughts already shifting. To the paperwork, the case files, the trial to come, but some part of him, the human part, would always remember this moment. The girl, the baby, the friend who wouldn't give up. The story that could have ended in darkness, but didn't. Interrogation Room 2. In a small windowless room downtown, Mary Hartley sat in silence, wrists cuffed, expression unreadable. Across the table, a female detective leaned forward, hands folded. You knew it was wrong. Mary didn't blink. You helped drug her, kept her locked in a cellar. You impersonated her in texts. You posted as her on social media. Still nothing. Why? At last, Mary turned her head. Her voice was almost a whisper. I gave him something he thought he lost forever. Whom? Mary looked down at her hands. My husband. The detective didn't flinch. And the girl? Mary's eyes narrowed. She was temporary, an inconvenience, a biological middleman. The room fell silent. The interview. That evening, Emma sat in a TV studio, dressed modestly, face pale, voice steady. She had agreed to one exclusive interview. Not for fame, but because the world needed to understand how this could happen. I just kept thinking, she told the anchor. What if no one had asked questions? What if I had just assumed Alina left on her own? She paused. We don't know how many people are hidden in plain sight. Locked behind doors we don't knock on. Erased from systems that stop tracking them when they hit adulthood. The segment aired nationally. Within hours, the Portland PD tip line was flooded with new leads. People inspired, people horrified, people wondering if they too had missed something in their own neighborhoods. Carter's final entry. Back at his desk, Carter finished the case summary. He wrote with precision, but every few sentences he paused, staring at the photos on the corkboard behind his screen. Alina in Vienna, holding a violin. Isaac, just after being rescued. William Hartley's faculty portrait, now stamped suspended without pay. And Mary, the housewife who never smiled wide enough, who kept things clean, who believed in control more than anything else. Carter closed the file, then slowly pulled out a Post-it and scribbled something. He stuck it to the monitor. People don't vanish. They're erased. One quiet decision at a time. Final scene. The walk home. At dawn, Alina stepped out of the hospital for the first time in weeks. Isaac, wrapped in a blue blanket, slept against her chest in a soft carrier. Emma walked beside her, hand lightly resting on her arm. The air was cold, but the world smelled different now, like possibility. They walked slowly, no rush to be anywhere. Somewhere behind them, reporters waited, lawyers waited, police waited. But for one brief, perfect moment, none of it mattered. She had her son, she had her name, and she had the right to breathe again. Justice doesn't heal, but it makes the wound visible. 3 months later, the Multnomah County Courthouse was packed. Reporters lined the marble halls, protesters held signs outside. Justice for Alina. Professors are not above the law. The gallery was filled with victims' advocates, law students, and silent observers who had followed the case from the moment it broke. Inside courtroom 6B, the People versus William and Mary Hartley officially began. Alina sat on the left side, flanked by her attorney, her parents, who had flown in from Vienna, and Emma, her unwavering anchor. She wore a dark blazer and minimal makeup. Her face was calm, but her hands never stopped shaking. She didn't look at William. She couldn't. Opening statements. The prosecution was clear from the first moment. This is not just a case of kidnapping, said Assistant District Attorney Lauren Moreno. This is a case of entitlement, of a man who used his position to manipulate, impregnate, and then imprison a vulnerable young woman, and of a wife who participated in the crime, who impersonated, imprisoned, and intended to erase the real mother from existence. William Hartley's attorney, a sharp-suited man with a weary expression, opened more carefully. My client is not a predator, he said. He is a man who made mistakes, deep, damaging, unethical mistakes. But he never harmed the child. He never physically harmed Ms. Schwartz. He was caught in a situation he didn't know how to escape. But the jury wasn't looking at him. They were looking at Alina, and the space between her and the man she once trusted. The evidence unfolds. Day 2, text messages from Mary Hartley's phone, forged conversations with Alina's parents, time-stamped images from Alina's stolen Instagram account, security footage showing her entering and never leaving the Hartleys' garage. Day 3, medical testimony. The attending ER physician described Alina's physical condition upon rescue: malnourished, dehydrated, early signs of muscle atrophy. A therapist testified that she exhibited symptoms consistent with captivity trauma. Day 4, baby Isaac's birth certificate, forged, no hospital record, no legal guardianship, no adoption proceeding. Only William's signature on a false affidavit submitted to a private registry 2 counties away. The testimony. Emma LaRue took the stand next. She spoke softly but firmly. Her voice never wavered, even as she recounted the night she broke into the Hartleys' garage. She wasn't just hidden, she said. She was erased. She didn't scream? The defense asked. She did once, Emma replied, then never again. And you assumed she was there. What if you were wrong? Emma turned to the jury. Then I would have broken into a garage for no reason, and I'd do it again 1,000 times. The courtroom was silent. William Hartley's testimony. On day 6, William took the stand in his own defense. He looked older now, hollow, the proud professor reduced to a man unraveling under oath. I loved her, he said. Ms. Schwartz, the prosecutor asked. Yes. And yet you allowed your wife to lock her in a basement? I didn't know at first, but you found out, and still you stayed silent. Still you kept her child. William paused. I thought we could create something new, something better. There were gasps in the gallery. Alina closed her eyes. And did it ever occur to you, the prosecutor said, stepping closer, that what you were building was built on theft, on trauma, on lies? William's voice broke. Yes. Mary refuses to testify. Mary Hartley, charged with unlawful imprisonment, identity fraud, and child endangerment, declined to testify. Her lawyer entered a plea deal offer behind closed doors. In the courtroom, she remained silent, impassive, and cold. When she was escorted out, she looked at neither William nor Alina. She looked at the baby and whispered, I named him Isaac. The verdict. On the 9th day, after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. William Hartley, guilty on 3 counts. Kidnapping in the 2nd degree. Custodial interference. Filing false documents. Sentencing to be determined, with a recommendation of 12 to 18 years. Mary Hartley, guilty on all charges under her plea agreement. Recommended sentence, 20 years, with possibility of parole in 12. Alina wept, not out of triumph, but from something deeper. Release. Outside the courthouse. When Alina stepped outside, baby Isaac in her arms and Emma beside her, the world was waiting. Microphones, cameras, flashbulbs. But she didn't speak. She simply lifted Isaac gently to her chest, kissed his head, and walked forward into the chaos and through it. A woman who had lost everything, and now had something no one could ever take it again. The noise fades. The world moves on. But some echoes never stop ringing. 1 year later, a cold October wind blew leaves across the stone paths of Mount Tabor Park, where families strolled with strollers and joggers passed by in silence. The city had healed, at least on the surface. For most Portlanders, the Hartley case was old news. The trial was over. Headlines had moved on. New scandals had taken their place. Most people had stopped asking questions. But for those who lived through it, the silence wasn't peace. It was the sound left behind after something violent passes through. Alina's new life. Alina now lived in a quiet apartment in northwest Portland, not far from the river, just far enough from campus. She no longer looked over her shoulder every time she stepped outside, but she still triple-locked her door, still kept a baby monitor by her bed, even though Isaac now slept through the night. She took online classes, not in philosophy, but in law. She wasn't trying to forget. She was trying to understand the systems that failed her, and to one day fix them. Twice a week she met with a trauma therapist. Some days she spoke, others she just sat in silence. But every day she fought to feel like her body belonged to her again, like her name was hers alone. Emma's voice. Emma became the voice of the movement. She didn't plan it. But when a journalist from The New Yorker came to town for a profile, it was Emma they followed. Not the courtroom, not the detectives, not the lawyers, because Emma had done what most never dare. She broke into a stranger's house not to steal something, but to find someone. A year later, she spoke at conferences. She helped design a university campaign called Stay Loud, a nationwide initiative for students to report missing classmates without waiting 48 hours. And still, she called Alina every Friday at 6 p.m. without fail, just to say, "I still believe you." Detective Carter's Case Board. Detective Julian Carter had moved on to other assignments: organized crime, drug trafficking, missing teens. But the Hartley case stayed on the wall behind his desk. Not because it was unsolved, because it had become a benchmark. A reminder that sometimes evil doesn't come in the form of weapons or rage. Sometimes it comes dressed in cardigans, quoting Plato, with good manners and a well-kept lawn. He gave guest lectures now, at police academies, at schools, and he ended every talk the same way. You don't wait for someone to scream, you look for the silence, because that's where they hide. William Hartley, inmate number 427391. He now resided at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility in a medium security block. He kept mostly to himself. He taught GED classes to other inmates. He read the same books over and over: The Republic, The Stranger, Being, and Time. And once a month, he wrote a letter to Isaac. He didn't send them. He wasn't allowed to. He kept them in a worn notebook tucked under his mattress. Each one began with, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know what I felt." But Isaac wouldn't know. Not now. Maybe not ever. And somewhere deep inside, William knew that was part of the price. Mary Hartley, gone without a trace. Mary never appealed her sentence. She declined all interviews. She requested no visitors. Even the warden described her as eerily still. In the prison yard, she walked laps alone. No eye contact, no alliances. One guard once asked if she regretted it. Mary looked up, her expression unreadable. "He was slipping away. I gave him a reason to stay." The guard never asked again. Isaac's world. He was now 18 months old. He had Alina's eyes. He loved music, danced in circles when the radio played. He called Emma, Emma. He laughed when the wind blew too hard and hated wearing socks. He would grow up knowing the truth one day. Not from headlines, not from gossip, from Alina, and only when he was ready. Final scene: the library table. One rainy afternoon, Alina took Isaac to the public library. She sat with him at the kids' table, helping him flip the pages of a picture book. He babbled, pointing at a fox, then a tree. At the next table, a mother turned and smiled. "He's beautiful," she said. "Thank you," Alina replied. "Is his father around?" the woman asked casually. There was a pause. Then Alina looked her in the eye. "No." She turned back to Isaac. "And that's okay. There's nothing brave about surviving. The bravery is in choosing to speak after. The studio lights were soft, almost gentle, a muted navy backdrop. 2 chairs, no desk, just a space that looked more like a living room than a television set. The producers wanted intimacy, not spectacle. Alina sat across from Diane Greer, the seasoned journalist known for interviewing trauma survivors with a kind of maternal gravity. The room was quiet, but for the hum of cameras and a single boom mic overhead. She wore a dark green blouse, hair loose over her shoulders. No makeup except light concealer. Isaac was with Emma in the green room, playing with plastic farm animals and humming to himself. The red light on the camera blinked to life, and they began. "Do you remember the first time you thought something was wrong?" Alina looked down for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I had just given birth. I woke up in a room I didn't recognize. I asked where my baby was, and Mary smiled and said, 'He's upstairs, with us now.'" A beat of silence. "And what did you feel?" Diane asked softly. Alina's hands gripped each other in her lap. Detached, like I had fallen out of my own life and landed in someone else's. I thought if I stayed calm, maybe I could figure out a way out, but the door never opened. "Were you angry with William?" A longer pause. Alina's lips pressed into a thin line. "I was heartbroken, and ashamed, and then angry. But it took months." She met Diane's gaze. "I don't think people understand how long it takes to believe that someone who once touched you kindly is capable of cruelty. Did you ever fear you wouldn't get out?" Alina's eyes welled, but no tears fell. "Every day, but especially at night, when I'd hear them laughing upstairs, or when I heard the baby cry and I couldn't go to him. That's a special kind of fear. It's not just that you'll die, it's that you'll be forgotten. What would you say to Mary if she were watching right now?" The question hung in the air. The room seemed to exhale. Alina shifted, looked into the lens. "I don't forgive you, but I want you to know that Isaac will never carry your lie. He'll grow up knowing truth, love, freedom, none of which you gave me." The public responds. The episode aired on a Friday evening. By Saturday morning, it had been viewed over 3 million times across platforms. Hashtags re-emerged. Hexdiger stand with Alina, Wack, erased but not broken. Not your family, but there was another side. In her inbox, Alina found dozens of messages. Most supportive, a few disturbing. "You made him suffer. You lied, too. Women like you ruin good men. Maybe you should have just walked away if it was that bad." Anonymous accounts, no real names, but they shook her anyway, as if the past refused to stay in its cell. The envelope. On Monday morning, a padded envelope arrived at her apartment. No return address. Inside, a folded piece of newspaper, the article about the interview, and on it, written in black marker, "Truth has 2 sides. You've told yours. His is coming." No signature. Alina's hands trembled as she dropped the envelope. She backed away, picked up the phone, dialed Carter. Carter reacts. Detective Carter listened silently, then said, "It could be nothing. Could be someone trolling. But I don't like the handwriting." "You recognize it?" Alina asked. "I've seen it in the margins of William's court notes. I'll run it. In the meantime, increase your security. I'll call your landlord." Alina exhaled shakily. "It never really ends, does it?" "Sometimes," Carter said, "but only if we keep standing between you and the dark." Final scene. The baby monitor. That night, Alina sat on the floor of the Isaac's room, watching him sleep. The monitor blinked gently. Soft, white noise filled the air. She closed her eyes and leaned her head against the crib. Isaac stirred slightly and murmured a sound that sounded almost like her name. She whispered back, "I've got you. No one's taking you again. but somewhere, in some cell, in some corner of someone's mind, a different version of the story was already forming. It doesn't take a monster to repeat a crime. It takes someone who believes the first one wasn't so bad. The bookstore was quiet that afternoon. Tucked in the back corner of a used bookshop on the east side of Eugene, Oregon, a young man sat hunched over a stack of philosophy texts. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and a faded Portland State hoodie. A name tag on his sweater read, Theo. He wasn't a student anymore, but he once had been. A bright one, top of his class. He had sat in William Hartley's seminar on the ethics of civilization. He'd visited office hours weekly, written a paper that the professor once described as startlingly brilliant. And even now, even after everything, Theo considered him the only man who had ever truly understood him. The letter. Theo opened his messenger bag and pulled out a padded envelope. He had received it 3 days earlier. No return address. But he knew who it was from. Inside, a handwritten letter, 4 pages, tightly written. It began, Theo, if anyone can understand the real version of what happened, it's you. William's handwriting was firm, clear, emotional, but not frantic. The letter wasn't a confession. It was a justification. She wanted to leave. She said she didn't need me. She said she would go back to Europe and take the child. Mary. She acted first. I only followed. Theo read it 3 times, and then again. He didn't agree with everything in it, but he didn't throw it away. Online. That night, Theo logged onto a private online forum. It wasn't social media. It wasn't even indexed by search engines. It was called The Third Lens, a password-only forum for academic dissenters. Philosophy grads, outcasts, expelled professors, the kind of people who believed the world had gone soft. Theo posted a thread. What if our moral revulsion is shaped by narratives instead of facts? Can we trust courtroom truths when emotional bias overrides logical assessment? Attached, a PDF transcript of William Hartley's trial testimony. A blurred image of the TV interview with Alina Schwartz. Within an hour, replies flooded in. The girl was complicit. This is what happens when women get to rewrite events. Hartley was a casualty of modern hysteria. One reply stood out. The story isn't over, and maybe it shouldn't be. Theo clicked the username. It had no profile. Just a blinking cursor. He typed back, "Are you saying what I think you are?" The response came instantly. "Meet me. Tomorrow. Pine and 3rd Second, dusk. You know the bench." Theo leaned back in his chair, heart racing. Memory of a bench. The bench. It was the one where he and William used to sit during breaks between lectures, under a willow tree. Outside the faculty hall, they had discussed everything from Kierkegaard to Kafka there. William had once told him, "The law is always 20 years behind the truth." Now, Theo didn't know what waited at that bench, but he knew he'd go. Final scene. Across the river. On the other side of the city, Alina tucked Isaac into bed. She was tired. Too tired to check her email. Too tired to notice the new comment waiting in the inbox of her blog. The trial was the end for you, but not for us. No name, just an icon. A tree. Twisted, leafless. Dead in winter. Terror doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it speaks in calm voices and calls itself a conversation. The rain began just after dusk. A steady Portland drizzle that filtered through the branches of the willow tree like a slow, persistent whisper. Theo sat on the familiar wooden bench beneath it. The hood of his coat pulled low over his glasses, a notebook resting on his lap. He checked the time. 6:41 p.m. The bench looked the same as it had 3 years ago, weathered but unbroken, just like the ideas they used to share here. He used to sit on this bench with Professor Hartley. They spoke in abstract terms about order, moral certainty, consequence without emotion. Now, Theo waited for a stranger. The arrival. At exactly 6:46 p.m., a man approached from the edge of the courtyard. He didn't rush. He didn't hide. He wore a dark peacoat, black gloves, and no umbrella despite the rain. Theo stood slightly uncertain. The man sat beside him, close, but not too close. No greeting, no name. He simply pulled a folded newspaper from his coat and laid it flat between them. The headline, "Survivor Speaks Out, He Tried to Erase Me." Beneath it, Alina's photo. Eyes calm, lips tight. The man tapped the image with one gloved finger. "She told her story. Now it's our turn." The conversation. Theo swallowed, his voice low. "Careful. Who are you?" The man smiled faintly. "A student of the same discipline." "Discipline?" "Control, precision, structural clarity." Theo glanced sideways. "You knew William?" "We exchanged ideas, long ago, before the story became one-sided." Theo's hands twitched in his pockets. "I'm not a radical." "No," the man said, "but radicals aren't born. They're invited. One theory at a time." Silence, then. "There are others, you know. Quiet, careful. Men like Hartley who never acted, but believed. Who were watching, waiting, wondering if the system was ever going to bend." Theo's breath caught. "Bend?" The man turned. "Or break." The envelope. From his coat, the stranger pulled a small manila envelope. He placed it gently on the bench. "No pressure," he said. "You don't have to read it tonight, or ever, but if you're asking what comes next..." He tapped the envelope. "This is the answer." Theo stared at it. The man stood, disappeared into the rain without another word. The content. Back in his apartment, Theo placed the envelope on his desk, stared at it. Minutes passed, then he opened it. Inside, a folded map of Portland. 3 addresses circled in red, a list of names, and one sentence, handwritten in the margin: "There's more than one way to erase someone." Meanwhile, Alina's apartment. Alina sat at her kitchen table scrolling through Isaac's daycare photos. She smiled at one. He was covered in finger paint, holding a plastic giraffe like a trophy. Then her smile faded. In the background of the photo, just outside the daycare's picket fence, a man in a peacoat, out of focus, but unmistakable. Lone wolves don't form networks, but ideologies do. Detective Julian Carter didn't want to return to this world. Not again. He'd spent the last year on violent crimes. Robberies, trafficking rings, missing teens, real monsters, tangible threats. He thought the Hartley case was behind him, but when the email hit his desk, he froze mid-sentence. Subject line: urgent. Possible repeat pattern. Attached photo: a daycare snapshot. Child in the foreground. Background: a man in a dark peacoat, standing still at the edge of the frame. Carter's hands tensed on the mouse. He enlarged the image, enhanced contrast, zoomed. It wasn't William Hartley, but the posture, the position, the timing. It was deliberate. And the child, Isaac Schwartz. The call. He called Alina personally. "Don't panic," he said, "but we need to talk. Right now." 20 minutes later, he sat across from her kitchen table, his badge folded on the counter between them. Emma stood nearby, arms crossed, listening closely. Alina held Isaac tighter than usual. The boy played with the toy train, unaware of the tension thickening around him. "I've seen that man before," she said quietly. "Where?" "A photo forum, back when I was a student. He used to leave long comments under Hartley's lectures on YouTube." Philosophical stuff. Long words, always signed LC. Emma stepped in. Why wasn't this flagged before? Because we assumed Hartley acted alone, Carter replied. And now? Alina asked. Carter hesitated. Now I don't believe that anymore. Back at HQ, the wall grows. By nightfall, Carter had cleared the whiteboard in his office. One by one, he added, William Hartley, incarcerated, Mary Hartley, incarcerated, Theo Landers, former student, reclusive, working in Eugene, unknown male, alias LC, suspected of surveillance behavior. Then the map. 3 new red dots. One matched the daycare. Another, a library near Alina's apartment. The third, a women's shelter in Vancouver, Washington. No reported incidents. But each location shared a pattern. Recently traumatized women. Children. Vulnerability. Carter's gut turned. This wasn't admiration, this was replication. A message from Theo. At 10:47 p.m., Theo sat alone at his desk, the map from the envelope now pinned on his wall. His fingers hovered over his keyboard. He opened a private browser. Connected to the Third Lens forum. Typed, I've seen the files, I have doubts, not about the verdict, about the story you're building. A reply appeared within seconds. If you want to leave, leave. If you want to lead, we're listening. Theo stared at those words. He closed the laptop. Heart racing, he hadn't signed anything, hadn't joined anything, but the envelope was still there. So was the name at the top of the paper. Alina Schwartz. Final scene. The van. In a downtown parking structure, a black van idled silently. Inside sat the man from the bench. Peacoat, gloves, calm breath. He opened a laptop and played a video. The interview. Alina's face. Her words. He tried to erase me. The man paused the screen. Zoomed, Isaac in her arms. He smiled slightly. Then closed the laptop. Outside, the rain began again. They don't knock, they don't break in. They observe, they study, and then they step forward. Detective Julian Carter hadn't slept in 36 hours. His whiteboard was covered edge to edge. Threads of red yarn connected photographs, screen names, IP addresses, a web of usernames from private message boards, video comments, encrypted group chats. It started with William Hartley. But it had grown. He had a name now. The Watchers. An underground network, small, tight, intellectual, not openly violent, not yet, but growing bolder. They didn't need weapons, they had doctrine, and someone at the center was giving them structure. Theo's choice. At exactly 7:14 a.m., Carter knocked on the bookstore's side entrance in Eugene. Theo Landers opened the door. He looked exhausted, pale. He didn't speak. He just stepped back. Carter walked in slowly. You reached out through the forum. You asked if I'd listen. I'm here. Theo said nothing for a moment. Then, I didn't think they were real at first. I thought it was theory. Dialogue. Then they asked me to find addresses. Did you? I stopped before I gave them anything, but someone else didn't. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket and handed it over. They're planning something. Carter's jaw clenched. What? Theo looked him straight in the eyes. They want a child, not to harm, to raise correctly. A clean start, a controlled identity. The way Hartley tried with Isaac. Carter's throat tightened. They're not copying Hartley, Theo whispered. They're refining him. Operation Red Wing. Within 12 hours, Portland PD, FBI cybercrime agents, and local task forces initiated Operation Red Wing, a coordinated sweep on 5 targets in 3 counties. Seizures included laptops with forum logs, surveillance photos of single mothers, copies of Alina's interview annotated in margins, flash drives labeled Ascension Protocol. In one location, a farmhouse outside Corbett, agents found a soundproof room under construction. No children, no victims, not yet, but the blueprint was identical to the Hartleys' basement. The final interrogation. In an undisclosed holding room, Carter sat across from the man in the peacoat. He had finally been identified. Name, Lawrence Callum, age 39, ex-university lecturer in Colorado. Dismissed for inappropriate philosophical indoctrination. His face was calm, hands still. Carter leaned forward. What was the end game? Lawrence blinked slowly. There is no end, just correction. Correction of what? Lawrence smiled faintly. Of chaos, of noise, of choice. You mean of women, Carter snapped, of independence. Lawrence tilted his head. You people call it abuse, we call it design. Carter stood. We're shutting you down. Lawrence didn't flinch. Maybe. But the watchers aren't one body. We're thought, and thoughts replicate. 1 year later. Epilogue. Alina stood on a small stage at a university conference. Her presentation was called Freedom After Captivity, Reclaiming Narrative Through Law. She spoke not as a victim, but as a scholar, as a mother, as someone who had lived through design and broken it. Emma sat in the front row, smiling. Detective Carter stood near the exit, arms folded, watching the crowd. Somewhere in the audience a man took notes. Maybe a journalist. Maybe not. Carter didn't relax, not fully, not ever. Final scene. Isaac's voice. That night at home, Alina tucked Isaac into bed. He was nearly 3 now, strong, playful, wise beyond his age. "Mommy?" he asked. "Yes, baby." "Am I safe now?" Alina paused, kissed his forehead. "Yes," she said, but as she turned off the light, she glanced once more out the window. Across the street, a woman in a coat was walking her dog. Nothing suspicious, nothing wrong. But she waited until the woman disappeared around the corner before drawing the blinds, just in case.